In this presentation, we're going to look at how to prepare textual data for your ATLAS.ti project. And also, we're going to be discussing the relationship between your data and the ATLAS.ti hermeneutic unit or project. And because in ATLAS.ti, the data are assigned to your project. They're not imported into an internal database, so they remain external to the project. So how you manage your data outside of ATLAS.ti is very important to understand. We will then move on to discuss how you can then assign your data to ATLAS.ti and also how you can create document families to organize your data within ATLAS.ti and how to assign your data to the different document families that they belong to. So first, looking at preparing textual data for ATLAS.ti. You can save your textual data in a rich text format. You can do that from within Word. And if you do that, you'll be able to edit them within ATLAS.ti, and also you can have within your documents photos and tables. However, it's also possible to save your textual data as normal Word documents. That's with a .doc or a .docx extension. But if you do that, you won't be able to edit them once they have been assigned to your ATLAS.ti project. And of course, you can also now assign PDFs into ATLAS.ti. When preparing textual data within Word, just use the default margin settings that there are in Word. And in general, it's a good idea to have a black line between paragraphs, so ATLAS.ti can recognize paragraphs, and to use full stops to indicate the end of a sentence only. In that way, ATLAS.ti will be able to recognize ends of sentences. However, there are times when you might want to change things a bit differently, and that is, for example, if you have any structured data. So here I have a structured interview schedule, and where all the question 1's are the same, all the question 2's are the same, etc. ATLAS.ti has an automatic coding feature which is quite useful for structured data such as structured interview schedules. But in order, so in that way you can automatically code for all the answers to question 1, all the answers to question 2. But to take advantage of that feature, you need to prepare your data in Word in a particular way. So if you see here, you need first of all to have a unique identifier for each question. So I have here Q01 for question 1, Q2 for question 2, which has to be consistent across your whole data set. And also you need to have a blank line between each question. So the way ATLAS.ti works is that it will find your unique identifier, and then you can set the automatic coding feature so that it will code from the unique identifier until it finds a multiple hard return, i.e. when you create a blank line, you are pressing enter twice, which is a multiple hard return. So now it will automatically code that whole extract as an answer to question 1. And the same thing when you want to code all the answers to question 2, you would just, in the auto coding feature in ATLAS.ti, search for Q2, and if you set it so it will code until it reaches a multiple paragraph mark section, which is a blank line, then it will code all that section as an answer to question 2. So just to recap, For structured interview schedules where all the question ones are the same and all the question twos are the same, you need to have a unique identifier for each question, such as Q1, Q2, Q3, and you should have a blank line. Focus groups can also be structured. They're certainly structured by different speakers, but they could also have a second level of structure of broad topic areas. So in this case, you would prepare the transcript so that each speaker would have their unique identifier. So in this case, Zidane is in caps, and it's in capital letters so that I can use, when I use the auto-coding feature, I can specify it to be case sensitive and only search for Zidane when it is written in capital letters. And that's to stop it to picking up Zidane when someone is addressing Zidane, so that that's not inaccurately coded. So each speaker will have their own unique identifier in capital letters, and as you notice, there's a space, a blank line, between each speaker. And if there is a second level of structure, i.e. if it is also structured by broad topic areas, then each broad topic area would also have its own unique identifier. In this case, they're discussing content, so the unique identifier is 06 content, and you notice that's also in capital letters. And I've put that under the name of each speaker. If you notice, I also have some other information after the name of each speaker, and that is the values of variables that are relevant to this study. I'll be discussing in a minute about how normally you would manage values of variables in ATLAS.ti, but in the case of focus groups where you have different speakers who might have different characteristics, you would have to use codes to represent the values of relevant variables. So the variables in this case are what A levels these students were studying, so that's why I have at social science, at science here, and whether or not they go to a comprehensive or a grammar school, and that's what at comp represents here. The at symbol is just something that is my own convention because words don't normally begin with at, and again, I would be using the auto-coding feature, for example, to search for all the @sciences and code all the content in the focus groups from students who are taking science A-levels to a code for science A-levels. So again, the way it works is that it would search for either, let's say, if we're going to be coding for different speakers, in this case Zidane, and wherever Zidane speaks in the focus group, his content would be coded up to the point where there's a double hard return and put into a code for Zidane. So you would have everything that Zidane said together in one place. The same thing to broadly code for broad topic areas. Again, I would search for 06 content, so it would go from that unique identifier again till it finds a double hard return, and so these pieces here would all be coded into a code for content. And the same thing for coding for the variables that I have here at social science, at comp, etc. So the auto-coding auto-coding feature can be very useful if you have any structured data, but in order to use it, you do need to prepare your transcripts in this way with unique identifiers and spaces in the correct place so that it would code exactly the bit of text that you wanted to code. But of course, ATLAS has been designed for totally unstructured data where you wouldn't use the auto-coding feature, in which case you have more flexibility about how you would prepare your textual data in Word. But I do recommend that think about a font and a font size that you find comfortable to look at. I also like to use colors like blues and greens for my questions, so they're easier to see, and just black text for the responses. It's not a trivial issue because you're going to be staring at the screen for a long time. Now, where your documents are located, they're located externally, external to ATLAS.ti. And this is very important to understand. Most packages of this type have an internal database, so you import your documents inside the internal database. ATLAS.ti doesn't work that way at the moment. The way it works is that inside the what's called the Atlas HU hermeneutic unit, all that means is your project, are just the codes, comments you've made on the text, networks you've created, etc. But the data themselves remains external to ATLAS.ti. So that includes any type of data, whether they're textual data, Word documents or PDFs, whether they're images, whether they're videos, whether they're audios, they all remain external to your ATLAS project. And when you assign a piece of data to your ATLAS project, what ATLAS records is the path to where it's located on your computer. Now, there are two special paths that ATLAS.ti uses, which I recommend you to use one of them, because that way you won't have to worry about losing the paths of your data, of losing your data in ATLAS. The first one, both of them are independent of directory structures, so if you're going to move your project from one computer to another, you don't have to worry that your second computer has a different directory structure than your first computer if you use one of these special paths. The first one is the text bank path. And what ATLAS assumes that the document is stored in a folder called text bank. Now, the text bank folder is created when you install ATLAS.ti on your computer. The disadvantage of using the text bank path for storing the documents that you're going to assign to ATLAS.ti is if you have several different projects that you're analyzing in ATLAS.ti, you probably do not want to mix up the data for these several different projects. In which case, the second special path is the one you'd probably prefer to use, and that's called the HU path. And I think that's the simplest and best option. And what that path is that ATLAS.ti assumes that the data for a particular project is stored in the same folder that holds the project file, the HU file. So basically what you would need to do is when you create your ATLAS.ti project, is to save the HU in the same folder with all your data. So that means that all your data would be within one folder, which could be stored anywhere on your computer, anywhere on any other drive you might have access to on some network drive. And it is possible within the broad folder to have subfolders if you prefer for different types of data, so you can organize your data that way. But the important thing is that there is one broad overall folder which holds both the HU and all your data folders. Now, if for some reason you're unable to use one of the special paths, so for example, if you are not allowed to store the data on your particular laptop, it has to be in some secure place, then you would have you'd have to use the absolute path. So therefore, you would decide where on your computer or network drive you want the documents to be located, and Atlas will remember this path when you assign it. So therefore, what Atlas remembers is the location of where the documents are when you first assign them to your ATLAS.ti project. And it will, so therefore, it will map out the path. So if it's on a network drive, so if it's on a K drive, for example, it will remember that it is, K slash your university name slash your department name slash your name slash and whatever what you decide to call the project folder, and it remembers that path. However, if you subsequently change the location of the documents, if you move them into another folder, then Atlas won't be able to find them when you open up your Atlas project, because it's looking for them in that original location where you assign the documents. And some people panic when this happens because they think, oh, I've lost all my data. I've been done a lot of coding. I've lost all the codes. No, you haven't lost your coding. Your coding is within the HU. It's just like the HU acts like a template that lays on top of your documents. And if it can't find your documents from that original path, then there's nothing for that template to fall onto. So it is possible to tell Atlas the new location of where you've put the documents, and you can do that. It's called, you can edit the primary document mappings, but ideally you don't want to have to go through that rigmarole. So the best thing is to decide in advance where they're going to be located and keep them in that one place. And the advantage of that using this absolute path is that you can have several team members working on the same project using the same documents, and the documents are just stored in one location, for example a network drive, which each researcher would have their own separate HU, but they would all be pointing to the one set of documents that's located in the same place.